Christmas morning can be a really hard time to photograph. There's usually a flurry of activity, less than optimal lighting, plus of course you're trying to be involved in the day too. So today I have 10 tips for you covering everything from camera settings to lighting to practical advice that's going to help you create awesome memories of your Christmas morning. Now, if you're new here, my name is Audrey Ann and I teach you the ins and outs of your camera so you can beautifully capture your children, your family and the world around you. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and you'll get notified every time we release a new video, which is every single week. But for now, let's dive into our 10 tips for capturing Christmas morning. So the first tip I have for you is to make like a Boy Scout and be prepared. You want to make sure that you have your battery fully charged. If you have a spare battery, that's fully charged as well. You have your memory card cleared of all photos and ready to go. Again, if you have a spare card, have that cleared and ready to go too. I also like to make sure that I've got the right lens on my camera that I'm going to use that day, that it's cleaned and ready to go. And I also have my camera set with the ballpark camera settings that I think I'm going to need in the morning. That way, in the morning, all I actually have to do is grab my camera and start shooting because I've pretty much got everything prepared the night before. The second tip I have for you is to make sure that you're using a wider angle lens. That's one with a shorter focal length. So something like a 35mm or even a 24mm on a full frame camera is ideal. It's just going to allow you to capture more in the frame. And you generally want that with this kind of lifestyle shots. You want to add context by keeping in more of the surroundings. And you're probably going to want to capture more than one person in the frame at any one time as well. It's also just easier, you can then just quite easily crop in a little bit if you want to tighten up the shot. So I always tend to use a wider angle lens, and for me that's my Sigma 35mm. I'll link to that in the description below. If you have a crop frame, then something like a 24mm is probably going to be ideal for you. Tip number 3 is to hike up your ISO number if you need to. Now, I know many people are scared of using higher ISO numbers, especially if you're using a crop frame camera. But it's far better to use a higher ISO number and then just deal with the noise and processing than it is to try and keep your ISO as low as possible and you end up with having subjects blurry because you've used too slow a shutter speed or you haven't had enough depth of field to get everything you want in focus. Also, don't be tempted to use a lower ISO than you need and underexpose and then try and bring that up. In editing, you're just going to end up with even more noise. So lifestyle images like this don't have to be absolutely perfect. Don't be scared of using that higher ISO if you need to. I'd much rather risk a little bit of noise in the image than have one that is out of focus. Now, we also have a video on dealing with noise and grain in your images. I'll link to that below in the description underneath this video. So do give that one a watch. That's going to be really good for you if you are intending taking photos on Christmas morning when it's still a little bit dark. Now, tip number 4 is to shoot in manual mode. That's going to give you the control over your aperture, shutter speed and ISO settings that you need to take images in usually what is kind of tricky lighting. You've usually got slightly darker outside than you want, less natural light coming in. You've usually got artificial light, some lights from the trees. It can be a really tricky time to photograph. So make sure that you're shooting in manual mode if you possibly can. If you're not yet sure about shooting in manual mode, what settings you might want to use, then be sure to download the manual mode cheat sheet we have for you. It's completely free. You can grab it. There's a link underneath this video to it. Go and get your copy so you're ready for shooting on Christmas morning. So still on camera settings, tip number 5 is to watch your shutter speed and make sure that it doesn't drop too low. Now, if you are still on auto mode or aperture priority mode, you'll find that your camera very frequently gives you too slow a shutter speed. As an absolute minimum, make sure that your shutter speed is at over 1/125 as a minimum if you're photographing a person. If you're photographing a child, then you're going to want to double that, at least 1/250. So do make sure, as I said before, if you're shooting in manual mode, you'll get full control over the shutter speed that you use. If you're still on aperture priority mode, then try and let more light in through your other settings, just to make sure that your shutter speed is nice and high so you don't get motion blur in your images. Tip number 6 is to make sure that you turn off your pop-up flash. That just gives a really snapshotty look to your image. It tends to give red eye in your subject, it washes them out, and it takes away the kind of mood and the ambience in the room. If you have the room nicely lit by lamps and some Christmas lights, you're just going to ruin that with that blast of harsh light from your pop-up flash. So try and let light in via your other settings. I'll be giving you some tips for lighting in just a moment, but try and maximize the light possible. Use your camera settings to maximize that light rather than resorting to pop-up flash. If you absolutely must, then use a diffuser to soften the light in some way. That's going to give you far better results than just kind of flashing all that light straight onto a person. It's just going to look snapshotty, wash them out and give them that dreaded red eye. Tip number 7 is to make sure that you use natural light if at all possible. So if you are in an area of the world where you have daylight at the time you're getting up on Christmas morning, great, use that if at all possible. So what I would do is make sure that you have where the activity is going to be taking place. For example, you're opening presents, have them do that in front of a window that has lots of nice natural light coming in, and set yourself up so that the light is behind you, the photographer. So you have the window behind you, natural light coming in, and that's hitting your subjects. Now, that is going to give you flat light, which we don't generally recommend for things like portraits. But remember, we're capturing Christmas morning here. We're not going for award-winning photography. If you can get light onto your subjects and that allows them to move around in this even light, you don't have to worry too much about it. That's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, if like me, it's absolutely pitch dark by the time you're getting up on Christmas morning, you have no choice but to use artificial lights. So what I would recommend that you do here is not use overhead lights if you can avoid it. Rather, turn on lots of different lamps in the room. That's going to give you softer lighting, and it's going to be much more flattering and give you a much warmer kind of feeling and mood than having lights come down on your subject. Really unflattering to have lights come from above. Plus, it's just not going to give you that kind of warm feeling that you kind of want from your Christmas morning photos. But if you have one, it's also the ideal time to crack out the speed light. I very rarely use on-camera flash at all. So a speed light is ideal if you're going to do this. It means you can bounce the flash away from your subject, and it's one of the few times of year that I'll actually dig out my speed light and use it. Tip number 8 is to make sure that you set a custom white balance. Now this is especially true if you are using lots of lamps, like we just said. You're using artificial light as opposed to natural light, because your camera will frequently get that wrong. So you can set your own custom white balance either using a grey card, or you can use something like an Expodisc. We actually have a video on how to use an Expodisc. I'll link to that again in the description underneath this video. At the very least, if you don't have a white balance tool or you're not sure how to use one, then at least use the custom settings in your white balance menu. And if you're using lamps, you're going to use the tungsten setting. That's going to get rid of that kind of nasty yellow color cast that you might get when using auto white balance. Now, we did speak there about using that wider angle lens so we could get more into the shot. But tip number 9 is to actually get close and capture some of the details. Here you can use a wider aperture, a larger aperture, that smaller f number, and you can blur out some of the background and focus more on the details that you're trying to photograph. That could be, the expression on your child's face. It could be the present that they're opening. It's little details. So once you have some of the wider shots of the scene, get in close and capture some of those smaller details as well. And finally, tip number 10 is to make sure that you get in the frame too. And this is so important for Christmas Day. You don't just want to be a bystander, the one taking photos, not really being part of the day. I want you to be in there too. I recommend that you use a tripod and an interval timer. Now, an interval timer looks like this. And what you can do is you can set this to take a set number of photos over a set period of time. So for example, you could actually have this set to take a photo every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds over a 30-minute period. And then you can just set your camera onto the tripod, have this attached to your camera, and it's going to fire off a random shot every 10 seconds for that 30 minutes or whatever you have that set for. And that means you can be in the frame, interacting with the people in the frame, enjoying your Christmas morning, and your camera is taking care of taking the photographs for you. Now, of course, they're not going to be absolutely ideal doing it this way. You could have people blinking at the wrong time and so on, but out of that half an hour, you're going to get a couple of good shots with you in the frame, and most importantly, you are going to be enjoying the morning. Now, I'm going to link to this below, this interval meter. You can pick one up for, I think, under $20 or around that price. You can also use something just like the remote timer, and you can just have that set so you can just press your remote timer and fire that off. And you can sometimes set on your camera some of this interval functions as well, depending on your camera model. But this interval timer is one of the best buys I've ever had in photography, so I do recommend that you pick one up. Now, I do want to know if you're going to try that last one, if you're going to set up a tripod and the interval timer and get in the frame. I'd love to know if you're going to try that, and I really hope that you are. So if you are, let me know in the comments below. Now, there won't actually be a video next week because it's going to be Christmas, so we're taking a little bit of time off, but we'll be back in the new year with a load of new videos that we have planned, so make sure that you subscribe. So that's it from me for today. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas and a wonderful new year, and I will see you again in 2020. Thanks so much for watching and for being here, and I'll see you next year. Bye for now.